So when I was 7, I had mumps, and so I missed the first 2 weeks of my junior school. I was absolutely fine, that wasn't a problem at all, but it triggered a stammer. So I'm a covert stammerer, which means that I'm a secret stammerer. So what did that mean to me? That meant that I just lost confidence, really. So late teens, I felt just, I suppose, I want to say stupid, and it wasn't.
Suzy, welcome to Aerobility. Thank you so much for joining us today on this show.
I'm delighted to be here, Harriet. Thank you.
Your story is very inspiring. You are a 777 long-haul captain. You are an aviation ambassador for the Department for Transport. And also, you go into schools to talk to young girls to try and encourage them to consider a career in aviation. And you're also very proactive in work raising awareness around the menopause as well. So, first of all, let's put it all into context. Tell me, what started you off with a career in aviation?
Well, I was surrounded by aviation growing up. I had my first flight on my father's knee in an open-air vintage glider when I was 4 years old. So for me, I was sort of brought up gliding, and I used to knit in the back of tugs when my father was flying them to tug the gliders up. My mother was a journalist, and she edited a gliding magazine as well. My brother flew. He was 2 years older than me, and he was really into the gliding, and now he's an airline pilot as well. But despite all that, I still didn't consider a career in aviation at all. It just didn't. I didn't see any female pilots. There were no role models when I was growing up. So I wanted to be a doctor, really. So I went to university and I joined an air squadron while I was there, which is run by the Air Force, like the Air Cadets, and they teach you how to fly. And it was there that I really sort of got inspired by flying and decided to try and make it a career. And then I applied to different things. I wanted to go into the Air Force at the time, but the Air Force weren't taking women for fast jet. They were only taking them for transport or helicopters. So I was lucky enough to get a scholarship with cadetship with British Midland, which was a short-haul airline at the time.
And then tell me about your transition then onto the 777. How did that happen?
So in Midland, I was short-haul. I did that, flew DC-9 and then a 737, did that for 6 years. Then I had enough hours to go long-haul. So then decided to go to a long-haul airline and initially joined on the 747-400. So I had 2 years on that beautiful, beautiful aircraft. So sad to see that retire recently. It was just the most wonderful machine I've ever flown. And then I went on to the 777 in 2000. So I've been on that for 22 years now, and I got my command on that.
Do you ever look back on that period on the UAS with the Royal Air Force when they weren't offering fast jet positions to women and think now with those positions being available, how different things might have been if you'd had those opportunities available to you at the time?
And completely. I think when you're growing up, when you're in this sort of Air Force and that environment, you go to air shows and you see the fast jets, and I just always wanted to have the opportunity to fly one. Luckily, on the Air Squadron, we were able to detach to different squadrons. So at Aberdeen, where I was taught to fly, we used to hold an air show every year, and we actually hosted them in our sort of clubhouse, the Air Squadron clubhouse. So you got to talk to the display pilots, and you'd say, "Oh, is there any chance?" And they'd say, "Yeah, if you come up to Lossiemouth, you can come and fly my Jaguar." And so you did, you went with friends and you went up there. So I got rides in all sorts of stuff. I flew Jaguars, Hunters, Harriers. I went in Red 10, which is the spare Red Hours aircraft, as long as transport and helicopters. So I feel that I had a good taste of it all. And I know I would have loved to have done it, but I wasn't allowed to at the time. So anyway, so I went airlines, and I've had a really interesting career with them.
So Suzy, you have achieved an incredible position. You are a long-haul captain on the 777 aircraft for a major UK airline, which is an achievement that I think many of us find trailblazing and inspiring. Sorry, is that too much? It's incredible. It is incredible. So tell me a bit about what your role involves and what skills you have to carry out that role on a daily basis.
I think day to day, it's all about lots of things, really. I suppose the main skills for being a commander or a captain is being a good leader, really, teamwork, decision making, communication skills are really important because it starts from as soon as you check in, you're meeting your first officer, you're meeting the cabin crew as well, and you've got to get that rapport. Because it's such a big airline, I would say probably 80% of the time I've never met my first officer or first officers at all. Cabin crew I might know one or two. So you need to build that sort of teamwork and rapport, because as soon as you're flying, you need them to be able to, if anything goes wrong or they sort of feel something's not quite right, they feel comfortable in coming to you and saying, Suzy, there's a really odd noise. You know, they don't want to feel that you're too sort of arrogant, that they won't sort of speak to you. So that's really, really important to establish that straight away. And then it's basically driving the team forward. So you're going out to the aircraft, you're meeting with the load controllers, you're meeting with the engineers, you're just trying to gather all the information. And the whole idea, it is a commercial enterprise at the end of the day. So we've got to get that aircraft away on time with the cargo and the passengers and their bags as well. So you're just trying to move everyone together so eventually you push back on time. And that can be, you can't micromanage, you have to delegate things, you have to get other people to do stuff, but you just have to be really aware of the time and just sort of sometimes just chivvy people along a bit. And other times, sometimes you just have to sort of, I'm not saying cut corners at all, but you just have to prioritise what's important, and if things aren't that important, you just say, actually, do you know what? We don't need that today. We can go with this and, to get that on-time departure.
And talking about leadership that you touched on, that's really important, as you say. How have you found transitioning from being a first officer to being a leader, particularly while being female? And do you think sometimes women shy away from leadership roles?
I think that's quite fair. I think when you're a young woman, I don't think you always have the confidence to think that you'll be able to lead and do the sort of, the top jobs that people do. I think it's just learning along the way. It's getting support from your colleagues. In the airline that I'm in, we always recruit future captains, really. So at interview, they're looking for people who have got all those sort of skills and roles that they need to perform. I also think there's the term imposter syndrome that I think a lot of women relate to, in that they feel they don't necessarily have those skills in order to go for promotion. I think they say it's something like 80% that women only go for promotion when they feel they've got 80% of the qualifications, whereas men, I think, it's down at sort of 50. They just feel more confident, I think, to have a go. Whereas I think some women feel that they really have to be ready for it. And I think that's quite true. I think my career, I've had children halfway through, so I couldn't have done my command then. I was juggling children and childcare. I went for my command at my first opportunity for long haul, and I was ready to do it. And yeah, I was very delighted to get through.
What would you say to any young woman who is in a position where she's looking at getting promoted, whether it's aviation, whether it's outside of aviation, in a job in the city or any role, who is struggling with that imposter syndrome, with that lack of self-confidence? What would you say to them to say, you can really go for it? What skills would you advise that they draw on, or what are your top tips?
I think to start with, for me, I had to look back to where I came from. So, the first steps that you take into a career, you never think you're going to achieve, the ultimate. So sometimes I have to look back and actually see how far I've come, and that I deserve to be here, and that, it's my time. So I would say to them, do the work. You have to do the work in order to feel confident that you're able to achieve that role. And then, just do it step by step, break it down. Don't worry about the whole course or whatever you're doing. Just do it literally one day at a time. Finish that day. Think, yeah, okay, that was all right. I did that. And tomorrow, look at, do the briefing, do the work. And then eventually, step by step, you'll get there. And then you can look back and think, oh my God, I'm, even further than I was before. So.
And what about assertiveness and developing that? Because do you think women sometimes shy away from being assertive for fear of being called bossy?
I think that's true. I mean, I think it's difficult to get the balance right. And I think that's something you learn with time. I think watching I was in the right-hand seat as a first officer for a long time, watching how other people did it, other captains do it, and sort of model yourself on the good ones, because you do see bad ones as well. And you think, actually, well, I wouldn't have done that. I think naturally as women, we are sometimes a little bit more empathy. So we tend to be sometimes a bit more emotionally intelligent as well. So I think we can use those skills to sort of gauge the mood and sort of put ourselves in that sort of position. So it's learning, I think, and trying. And eventually, I think you sort of get your style, your sort of management style, where you feel comfortable, because you've got to have respect as well. You've got to, have authority, because ultimately when it all goes wrong, I've got to make this decision. So I need people to come on board and work for me and with me.
And you touched briefly on a very interesting point about looking at how other people do it. So how important do you think mentoring is in not just encouraging women, but in people from perhaps disadvantaged backgrounds or people with disabilities, into increasing the feeling of accessibility of a role?
It's so important to have a mentor, I think. I was unfortunate that I didn't have any mentors in aviation at the time, because there weren't any. My mentors, I suppose, were my parents, really. My mother was a journalist in quite a male-dominated environment. My father always supported my flying. He treated me exactly the same as my brother as well. But I think I've been very lucky to have some men in my life that I've met who've really just given me the confidence to try. Again, it's that word, try. To try and go for things. I think just going forward, it's sort of making your own opportunities a little bit, sort of seeing the opportunities there and just try and go for them, which can be really daunting. I mean, try is such a tiny word, but if you don't try, you're never going to sort of get anywhere to succeed. And if you get knocked back, then you just have to try a different way, try something else. So now I do mentoring for other people. People can connect with me, and I just try and just give them experience and give them all the information about scholarships that are available and open to everybody. Maybe try gliding. It's a very cost-effective way of learning how to fly as well. And just trying to give them hope and the facts and the reality of aviation. And it depends how high you want to go. Unfortunately, cost is a big factor at the moment, but if you can just start at the bottom, really, and hopefully things will open up soon in the industry, and cadetships will be available again soon for everybody, so we can actually increase diversity and just draw from a larger pool. That's all we want to do. Just want to get the best people for the job.
How important do you think diversity is to any industry, whether it's aviation or whether it's a company in a completely different industry?
I think it's important because you get different experiences and different ideas from people with different backgrounds. So I think it's very important to keep those that thinking fresh. It's unfortunately in a bit of the large airline companies, it is male dominated. All the managers tend to be sort of male, sort of high up. So we need to just get that, just normalize sort of the world in aviation. So you do have diversity all the way through.
Absolutely. And something interesting that you touched on earlier was about if things don't go to plan, just try again. So talk to me about failure. Have you ever had moments where you've maybe not done as well at something as you would have liked to have done? And if so, how did you overcome them?
So I suppose it starts back with two things. One thing, when I was 16, I had an appendix and I was about to do my GCSEs, or O-levels as they were called in those days. And I missed all my O-levels. I didn't take them at all. So it meant that in my sixth form, they very nicely let me do my O-levels and my A-levels at the same time. But I didn't get the grades I wanted to do medicine, which was a massive knockback. So I had to retake. All my friends went off to uni. I didn't. I stayed behind. I retook. And then I got into UCL to do physiology. And that step got me into the Air Squadron. So I think sometimes, and actually, would I want to do medicine now? Probably not. I really, really enjoy the career that I do. So I think sometimes when things knock you back, if you try a different path to get there, it can actually lead to better things. And sometimes you don't realise at the time because it's just devastating.
So one of the really big things that we like to talk about here on Aerobility is overcoming adversity. So can you give me any examples of any personal challenges you've had to overcome throughout your personal life or in your career, and what skills and resources you drew on to get through them?
Yes, so when I was 7, I had mumps, and so I missed the first 2 weeks of my junior school. I was absolutely fine. That wasn't a problem at all, but it triggered a stammer. So I'm a covert stammerer, which means that I'm a secret stammerer, which means that I try and hide it as much as I can. So for me at school, it was quite difficult because I really couldn't talk. I couldn't always say what I wanted to say. Sometimes I'd be fine, but other times it would really be quite bad. My friends, I didn't get bullied. Everyone was really kind and nice, and it was just me. I just had a stammer. But growing up, as I got older, when you sort of late teens, I probably found it the most difficult. I found one-to-one was fine. I found in groups, I went a bit quiet. I sort of was more of a listener. I got very good at, I want to say, sort of interviewing people, as in I'd always ask a question so they would speak, so I didn't have to. But the problem was, then went to university and then joined the Air Squadron, and I wanted to fly. Of course, there's quite a lot of talking on the radio. So for me, I just had to manage that. I had to write things down. Even now, I still have my call sign written down. I always have the PA written down, just so I got something to refer to. But it really knocked my confidence, really. So late teens, I felt just, I suppose, I want to say stupid. And it wasn't. So to get over that, talk about resilience, really. I mean, everyone was so kind, really. My parents were supportive. And I just, again, going back to the one step at a time, I think it's very important to just carry on and try not let it stop you do things. And it didn't really, looking back. There were some things that I did actually shy away from because I thought, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put myself out there. But I've always been lucky, being surrounded by really good friends and support. And I've just done it and done it to the best that I could. And I've always managed to achieve a standard which, was acceptable. And I think you become, when you have a disability like that, it's a very, very minor one, but I think you feel so conscious of it. You feel that everyone is listening and looking, and, so now, conversely, I do, school talks and things like that. So I don't enjoy it. I really don't enjoy it at all, but I just want to do it.
You've really pushed yourself out of your comfort zone. So what would you say then to anybody who is struggling with adversity or overcoming adversity?
I think not to be so hard on yourself. I think everything becomes very magnified. My speech for me is every mistake I make in my brain, I'm thinking, oh my God, I must sound really stupid, I suppose, is the phrase. So I think sometimes you just need to sort of almost take a look outside and sort of look back and think, actually, no, you're doing all right. Actually, don't be so hard on yourself. And just, again, for me, I have to look back at what I've done.
So what would you say then to anybody who is struggling to overcome a fear of failure, and perhaps it's holding them back from achieving their full potential? What would be your advice?
I think failure is quite a strong word, isn't it? I think at the time when you do fail, you just feel awful. It totally devastates your whole world. But I think actually looking back in hindsight, you get a lot of strength from it. You learn how you got through that difficult time of your life. So I think, I think if we're honest with ourselves, we fail pretty much most of the time. I mean, at work at the end of the day, we always, after a flight, we always do a recap of what went well and also what went wrong. And that's how you learn. You learn from the mistakes that you made. And I suppose through my life, I've, failure to be able to talk properly for me is a big failure, but also just carrying on and learning how to deal with it and not to be sort of so hung up on it that it stops you progressing. because that's what we want to do in life. We just want to, progress and do the best that we can do.
So Suzy, talk to me about resilience. What does it mean to you?
I think resilience means to me sort of just carrying on. If you can, if something goes wrong, that you need to just try and succeed and be determined. And it also means, I think, if you can't carry on for any reason, just to try a different way in order to get the end goal that you are trying to achieve. So it's just not giving up, I think.
So Suzy, you've really blazed the trail as a 777 captain, long haul captain. But tell me, throughout your career, you must have seen it change for women from when you're on the University Air Squadron and women weren't allowed into fast jet jobs to airlines taking first female commercial pilots in the 1980s. What struggles have you had to overcome being female in aviation and in a leadership position?
I think to start with, when I first joined Midland, I was the only woman out of 30 on my course at Oxford where we trained. And at the time, it didn't really occur to me. I didn't feel any different, really. I just sort of did my thing, and they're all my friends. And again, you find your tribe and you really sort of support each other. So when I joined my airline, it hadn't really occurred to me that I was only one of the first three to be there. Maternity policy was quite difficult to get to start with. When I joined another airline where there were women established, it still wasn't very, very good. It was only 6 weeks full pay, and then it was statutory maternity pay, so £50 a week then it was, which wasn't really a huge amount, particularly when you had to pay back flying loans and things like that. And then just going through, I think I never felt any different being a female. I think being a pilot, you're just a number, really. You go in and you do your work and you go home, you pass your sim check. So there's no positive discrimination at all. You just have to be able to perform. But now I think I'm getting so I've had children as well. And the issues we had there were getting flexible working. So when I first joined, there weren't any part-time roles available for females. So an awful lot of women pilots had left. They had their children, they weren't allowed to go part-time. They didn't want to go full-time, particularly when they were flying long haul. So they left in their early 30s. They gave it all up. And then it did get better, and you could bid for different things, and you got more part-time, which was fantastic. And then we got grounded roles. If you were grounded, you weren't allowed to fly when you were pregnant at all, and you got allowances, which was good because in the old days you didn't get allowances either if you were grounded. So that was a positive step as well. So it's all been positive, and we're getting there as well. And now the next big thing is menopause support, because again we're losing women as well. We're finding out that in the UK at the ATPL, the Airline Transport Pilots Licence holders, the number of those in the sort of menopausal age are the same number now as they were 20 years ago. And actually in the last 20 years, we've taken on so many more females. So it just means that for some reason that when that cohort gets to the menopausal age, they're leaving, retiring early. Whereas sometimes we just need a bit of support, really, just to get that through that transitional phase, because it is just a transient phase and doesn't affect everyone at all. But for some women, they really do struggle with some of the symptoms.
What do you think can be done by employers in general, not just in aviation, but in the general workplace, to support women going through the menopause?
I just think it needs to be normalised. We need to try and just make everyone aware, younger women and men as well, that what might be happening to their colleague, why they might just need a moment, just to sort themselves out, just to, take a step back from what they're doing, which we can't always do in our role. Stress is a really big trigger for hormonal symptoms as well. So we just need to just make it a kind of environment to work, really, and be supportive as we are with people with other issues at the moment, like mental health, just have a nice, caring, warm environment where people can thrive and do their jobs.
So the menopause is a huge life adjustment. But in a broader context, there are many life adjustments that our viewers or listeners may be going through, whether it's divorce, bereavements, redundancy, having a baby, children leaving to go to university. What advice would you give to someone going through an adjustment and how to handle it?
I think the best thing is to educate yourself and to find support groups as well. We run a menopause support group in our airline, and there are different support groups for all different sort of things. And it's finding people who you can have a conversation with, compare notes, and then work out how to sort of get through it, how to manage it, what's the best way of doing it. So I think it's very important to reach out and actually just try and normalize everything within, a business as well.
So Suzy, you've had a career lasting over 30 years in the aviation industry. If there was one thing you could change about it, what would that be?
You're making me sound very old, by the way. I think the main thing would be diversity for me. I do mentoring, and I'm trying to just increase the visibility of female pilots, really, and also just to increase diversity in airlines and make it more accessible to everybody. The cost at the moment is astronomical, really. So we're getting a very, very small section of society coming through. So hopefully, because the aviation industry is in recovery now, they will be able to offer cadetships in the future, and hopefully banks will again be able to offer loans so people can go down the modular route or whichever route they can do. So I think for me, that's what I'd like to see, a more diverse aviation industry.
And with that in mind, what would you say to any young person now, and what do you think your story so far can teach them?
I think I just came from a normal school and I found a job that I wanted to do, and I was very lucky to get a cadetship at the time. So I think you have to try and make some of your own luck as well if you can. I think take any opportunities that you can, try scholarships, try absolutely everything that you can do just to try and get your foot in the door. Use your mentors and just make yourself be known. And I think hopefully then, when the time is right, you'll be able to progress and, get a career in this, fantastic industry that I've, loved for so long.
So after 32 years, what's next for Suzy?
Well, so I've got 10 years to go. My children are sort of grown up now and left home. So I'm trying to, I suppose, give back really. So doing the mentoring, doing the school talks to try and encourage. I think the youngsters, it needs to be done from such a young age. I think they say that boys want to be pilots when they're sort of about 9 years old, but for female pilots, they don't consider it as a career until they're about 16, just because they haven't seen female pilots really. So for me, more of that, more recruiting, and just enjoying life really.
Suzy, thank you so much. It's been very interesting and inspirational to talk to you. You're a true trailblazer. Thank you so much for your time and for your honesty today.
Thank you, Harriet, for having me.